Coming up next on the Commissioner's Report, it's all about impact. Commissioner John Hall will be along to share with us his thoughts on the recently reinstated impact fees. And he'll share with us the positive impact that sports and tourism have for Polk County. And Commissioner Ed Smith will be here to talk about the ongoing infrastructure maintenance for the Inwood community and the positive benefits and impact of the Poinciana Parkway, which is currently underway. That's all straight ahead on this May impactful edition of the Commissioner's Report. Welcome to another edition, the May edition of the Commissioner's Report. I'm Mike Moore, happy to have you along. A little bit later on, Commissioner Ed Smith will be joining us. We're going to be talking about the Inwood community, which is right there beside Winter Haven. It's a community that's receiving some improvements. We're going to talk about that, but also Inwood is very special in the heart of Commissioner Smith. We'll let him tell you about that. But joining me right now is Commissioner John Hall. Commissioner Hall with District 5. Commissioner, it's great to have you here.
It's good to be back.
I was thinking if we were to title this segment, I was going to say impact. There's an impact on impact fees, better things for business with better growth, lower unemployment, and tourism. So really impact is a theme here on our discussion this today. But I want to kind of start with impact fees, because that's certainly been in the news lately in most recent board meetings. Just recently, last month, the board did approve, after a 5-year moratorium, to increase the fees or bring them back in place at a level. Tell us about that and why this is important.
Well, it is important because we have a backlog of necessary transportation projects. Those projects, impact fees can only be used for capital construction, but we have some new roadways and new sidewalks, things that we are in dire need of. Impact fees were placed in moratorium with a downturn in our economy. It's appropriate now to bring them back. We were concerned, as myself and as a full board, about the level of impact fees and the timing of the impact fees because of our economy, and it's just in its infancy as far as rebound. But it's coming back as of January 2016, and they will be at a lesser percentage than the full recommended percentage by the consultant.
Maybe it might help for some people who aren't really familiar. They've heard impact fees, but to define what an impact fee is, it's not something that goes on and on. It's a one-time fee. This is basically about new construction.
Yes. Impact fees are used, they're paid for growth. And it's, you've heard of letting growth pay for itself. Well, that's what this is. It's letting growth pay for itself. It's to pay for the necessary roadways. It's to pay for the necessary parks, for an increase in the sheriff's office and what they need to patrol those areas that have high growth. So impact fees are used for growth. It's not used for maintenance. It's not used for our backlog of maintenance and repair that we have a very large backlog, but this is growth paying for itself.
And I know there were some people who were wanting to have higher impact fees, but I know that you mentioned, and let me give a plug to something called Behind the Vote that's available. In fact, if you just go to YouTube and search Behind the Vote, then put in Commissioner Hall's name, you will find a great, really, explanation of your thoughts on impact fees. And I encourage people to do that and check for all the commissioners or whatever they're doing behind the vote. But one of the things you were saying is, you know, our economy is coming back, but we're not in that robust, strong growth. It is fragile, and you got to be very careful what you put in place now. You could have adverse effects.
Yeah, there are several different things that could impact the growth and our economy as it starts to rebound. And as stated in Behind the Vote, there's changes in the building code, and our economy now with our employment. The latest record, or the latest record that I've seen, has us at 6.1% unemployment. Well, the federal government considers 5.5 as employment saturation. That's where they consider fully employed. And when that happens, we have a change in, or a potential change in, interest rates. So building code, interest rates, impact fees, how's that going to affect our building and our local housing market? And that was a concern, still is.
And it's funny, you still hear some people think, well, isn't this an impact fee that the developer has to pay? That really isn't true. The end user always pays.
It's just like going to Publix. Publix, if they have an increase in the cost of any item, they're not going to assume that increase in cost. They're going to pass it on to the consumer. And housing, commercial activity, there's no difference. It's the same concept. It's the end user that will pay it. And we just have to be careful about how much we put on the end user and how many people are knocked out of a housing market by each $1,000 that a home goes up. That's a concern.
It really is a kind of a delicate balance, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
There
Yes,
are
it
benefits, but there also can be adverse effects. You got to really weigh that together.
Yes, yes, you do.
And the good thing is, as we were talking before we began taping here today, this is not something that can't be addressed really at any time, can it? You can address it whenever you need to.
It is our consultants. We have an impact fee study that is every 5 years, but the Board of County Commissioners can address this at any point in time that we need to. If it looks like we're going to adversely impact our economic rebound, then we can go back and put on the moratorium. Hopefully that will not be necessary, and especially given the growth in our economy and the decrease in our unemployment, I think that we're kind of on an uphill swing right now, but we could, as you stated, address it at any point in time.
And speaking of on an uphill swing, there's recently the building department for Polk County, I guess, added some positions, which is a sign of that growth you're talking about.
Oh, absolutely it is. They were actually going out, our building inspectors were going out with more inspections than they could get to on a daily basis. So we had to increase the number of building inspectors that we have in the field, and that is a good thing. That's an indicator that we have an economy that's on an uphill swing or a rebound, and that's wonderful.
And that's certainly an area with the county you're very familiar with.
Yes,
with
it
your
is.
past history. Let me change directions, but keeping on the theme of impact, talk about the impact of just tourism here in Polk County. And specifically, it seems like when we think of tourism, there's all sorts of things you can do, Legoland, of course, but sports tourism seems to have a big impact. And I'm thinking just recently spring training was completed, the Detroit Tigers, and I know we're very excited about them staying here for another 20 years. That's a big impact, not just during the spring, but then the Flying Tigers, the minor league team that's here, and the other uses of the facility at Tiger Town throughout the year.
Well, Tiger Town is actually open year-round. It's open for the major leaguers that need to come in and do some rehab work. If they get injured, then they can send them to Lakeland, and the Tigers have a long-standing agreement and a partnership with Watson Clinic to do that rehab work, and the major leaguers come in and do that. There's other uses for the facility where they bring high school and college age, I guess, guys from our South American countries to come up and start practicing baseball here in the States. They have some tutors that tutor English there. I don't know if a lot of people know that.
That's
but
interesting.
for non-English speaking ball players, and they teach them how to use and count American currency. So it's a full training. It's not just baseball. It's how to live in our society, and the Tigers, they're getting that right.
And it's interesting, when you were thinking of the Tigers, I wanted to make sure I got this right. This past spring, 2015, was their 79th season, which is currently the longest running relationship with an MLB team and a spring training site, and their 50th consecutive season at Joker Marchant Stadium. So that's just some longevity. That shows you the Detroit Tigers are very happy with Lakeland. They're
happy with Lakeland. It shows a commitment from the Tigers to this area, and our commitment back to them, and the fact that we have put money into, and the state has, and the city of Lakeland, into upgrades for that stadium in the coming year or two.
Right.
And I think that signing them to another 20 years, so that at the end of that contract they will have been the longest. They're currently the longest,
right,
but nearly 100 years at
Right.
the end of that contract. That
Yeah.
would be phenomenal.
Yeah, I think the contract goes through 2036 as it expires in 16. So that'll be, like you said, over 100 years. That's
Yes.
Wow. That's very impressive. I imagine the businesses, restaurants, hotelers, they love those kind of things. I imagine when every year when Sun and Fun, and now we're the 41st edition Sun and Fun, they love that as well because people are coming again, not just from Polk County, Florida, all over the world.
All over the world, Polk County is becoming a tourism destination, and it centers around quite often our sports. Lake Myrtle Complex in Auburndale is a fantastic venue for baseball. It's a great venue for soccer, and people are coming here from all over the world, not just to observe but to play, and it's just great. I can't say enough good stuff about that.
You know, we were talking earlier about some of these spring break baseball, Rust Mat tournaments for baseball, also the Rebel Spring Games where college teams from all across the country on their spring break come down to Florida where the weather's great, you know, and they get a chance to play, and yet but they also get a chance to go see the sights here. So, I mean, it's just a great economic boost for something like that.
Absolutely, and for those that are watching that do not know what that is, it's college teams from around the nation that come in here, and especially from up north in late February and March when it's too cold to get outside and practice baseball or girls college softball. It's an excellent venue right here in Polk County, because I think we had our winter on Wednesday this year. It was we had one cold day, so it was great. And for the college level men's league and the college level women's softball, it's fantastic to be here. And that's the difference in Rust Mat and the Rebel Spring Games. For those that are listening. The Rust Mat is the men's league. The Rebel Spring Games is the women's softball.
It's funny, sometimes spring break gets a bad connotation with crazy college kids on the beach, but this is a positive spring break, economic impact, but also it's fun for the family, and it's just a great time.
It is a positive spring break. And these athletes come in. They bring not only the game, but they bring a lot of economic impacts of millions of dollars annually. So I think that is something that we need to take a look at and make sure that we can keep coming back to Polk County in the future.
And it's always interesting how these kind of events build upon themselves. The more people hear about it, especially up north, the idea of coming to Florida during the winter always sounds appealing, but now they have a real reason, because I've heard people tell me the facilities here are some of the best they've seen. And that's important, because you don't want to go someplace, the weather may be good, but the facilities are poor. Those work together.
Absolutely. And that's what I was just saying, pardon me, about Lake Myrtle Park in Auburndale. That is a partnership with the City of Auburndale and with the county. And we're going to be looking to expand that and add another 4 baseball fields to that for the Rust Mat baseball in the spring. So it's a good partnership. The facilities are fantastic, and the weather is great.
Yeah. Commissioner John Hall, he's also a sports fan as well. I know you're out there playing if they'd let you, wouldn't you? You could probably still do pretty well.
Well, I quit a few years ago when I discovered I didn't heal as well.
Yeah, it's funny, as we get older, the healing process doesn't quite work as fast.
Right.
Well, Commissioner, thank you so much. I appreciate it. It went by very quickly here.
Yes, it did.
And I want to encourage you again to go, just Google YouTube Behind the Vote, and you can see there some other commissioners as well, but you can really hear a great, succinct 5-minute presentation. It goes by very quickly. Commissioner Hall and his views on impact fees. The theme was impact fees, tourism, of course, all impacting us in a positive way. Commissioner, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're going to take a short break, but when we come back, Commissioner Ed Smith will be here. We're going to talk about a community in Wood near and dear to his heart. He'll explain when we come back. Stay with us.
People think I'm trash, but they're wrong. Today I'm just an aluminum can, but one day I could be a stadium.
Welcome back to the Commissioner's Report, and joining me now is Commissioner Ed Smith. And Commissioner, it's always great to have you here.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. It's a real opportunity, and it's a real, I guess, a real pleasure and honor to be here with you today to talk to our TV audience.
I mentioned earlier in the show a couple of things we want to talk about. Obviously, we want to touch on some of there's a lot we could talk about. Well, hopefully, we'll get it all in, but we want to touch on the Polk Parkway, or the Poinciana Parkway, in just a second. But we want to begin with an area, the Inwood community, which I know is you have a personal tie to with your family, really with your wife, and a community that's been part of this county for a number of years. And we want to talk about some of the infrastructure maintenance that's ongoing and why that's so important. But first of all, for you, the Inwood community, it does touch home, doesn't it?
Well, absolutely it does. My wife's grandparents lived there, and she did a small part of her growing up in the Inwood area, especially when her father was away during World War II. Her mother and she and her younger brother moved in with her grandparents while he was away in Europe in World War II. So, yeah, I have some feelings and I have some ties there with the community, and I saw when I was elected some definite needs in that community that needed to be addressed.
Before we get into that, I want to make sure people know where Inwood is, the Inwood community, because a lot of people may not be familiar with it. Where is this located?
The area is, believe it or not, it's about 4,000 people that live in that Inwood area. It's located between Winter Haven and Auburndale.
Okay.
It is in unincorporated Polk County, but honestly, it is an urbanized area now, because when my wife lived in that area, she said it was very rural. There were cow pastures around their house, and one family raised horses, but that's not true now. I think just about every lot in Inwood is built out. There may be some vacancies, but not many.
Yeah, that's interesting how there are some places down in South Polk County where you see the cattle, but not there in near Winter Haven or Auburndale too much anymore.
Not much anymore.
Yeah.
No.
Well, for years, the county, I know, has been working with ongoing maintenance, the infrastructure, whether it's with sidewalks or drainage or the streets, and that's certainly what's been going on there. And maybe we can start off with talking about some of the needs. As you mentioned, when you became a commissioner, you saw some needs there. And well, let's go ahead and start with, I think we want to start with maybe some of the road resurfacing. Okay,
yeah, that's a good place to start. Polk County made a determination back in about 2008 to start a program there of resurfacing some of the streets in Inwood that badly needed it. And we made the determination that we were going to invest $8 million in that effort of resurfacing these streets out there. And so we sat down and we made a plan, and we divided the streets into 8 segments, and we'd do $1 million each year with that. And so we have progressed with it. We are now through segment 6, so we have 2 segments left, and it's moved along very well, and the streets are looking really, really very good. Now, some of the streets needed more work than others. It wasn't just a matter of coming in and just resurfacing it. Some of them had drains that ran under the streets that had collapsed. They had to be replaced. And so there was a lot of other work. Some of the underlayment that had been done wasn't done properly. So in some cases that had to be done. We found cases where in some of the lesser traveled streets that the original construction consisted of just coming in and pouring a layer of asphalt on top of the dirt. There was no underlayment at all, and no.
Wow.
So that had to be reworked. So there was a lot to be done there.
You know, Commissioner, a couple of things that you said there I hope people touched on even beyond this project. That you mentioned 8 phases. You know, sometimes people want things done immediately, and you also the cost. It's amazing how expensive it is to put in or to resurface and do these kind of things. $8 million for all these. People need to understand things don't happen overnight. It takes a while to get this stuff all done.
Well, absolutely, absolutely. Now we were very fortunate. The recession was both a curse and a blessing.
Okay.
It was a curse in that we didn't have much money as we would have had normally under normal circumstances. On the other hand, it was a blessing because construction costs got very, very cheap.
They dropped, right.
So that was a good thing too. The cost of materials became cheaper, labor became cheaper, Literally, a lot of the contractors were almost fighting for work because they were just trying to keep things going, you know. So construction bids were coming in lots cheaper than they normally would, and cheaper than the engineering estimates were. So we got some good deals during that period of time, which was a big help.
And you know, there's something about roads when you resurface them or repave them, improve them, that just adds to the community. Not just the fact that people are tired of driving over bumpy roads, but it makes the community look so much better when you just improve the roads alone.
Well, it does. It helps property value, and the big thing, Mike, that really it improves there is just people's morale and people's feelings about taking pride in their community and where they live. And that all translates into keeping up their property better. As I said, it translates into improved property values, and it just helps the community in every way imaginable.
And that's been a big part of what you're, even beyond the roads and sidewalks and drainage, which we're talking about, just the fact of the properties, keeping the code enforcement, keeping people to keep up with the property. This kind of does, like you say, kind of helps. If the roads aren't being taken care of, maybe they're thinking, why do I have to worry about my property? So it does kind of help that, doesn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's all a part of community pride. And you know, and I said, lack of pride has the same effect as somebody who is taking care of his property, and the guy next door says, gee, you know, his property really looks nice. He's taking care of his lawn. He's got his place cleaned up, and he's put a new coat of paint on his house. You know, ours could use a little bit of that too, and he starts doing it. The same effect can happen in the opposite direction when one guy decides, I don't feel like mowing the lawn, so he doesn't do it for a week, for 2 weeks, and then he starts putting garbage out and put old pieces of furniture out in the yard, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and he stops cleaning. Then the guy across the street says, you know, why am I out here killing myself on the Saturdays when I'm tired, I really need to relax. He's not mowing his lawn, I'm not going to mow mine either. So
and it just builds and builds and builds.
That can grow, I hate to use the word, but that can grow almost like a cancer of people not taking care of their property. So yeah, the whole issue, and my thought was when I first got started into this, what we've got to do in some of these areas is to reestablish community pride. Make people proud of where they live and of their property, and that will kind of spread too. So yes, we worked on that.
Now you touched on this about when they were doing the roads with the drainage, and I want to touch on that as well, because drainage had been a problem in this area as well. When it rains, the water didn't have any place to go. Absolutely.
In many cases, when there was a 2 or 3 day rain event, people were wading water in their front yard to get up to their house. I think we've solved that problem. There are a couple of areas that are not completely to where we want it, but they are very small pockets, and we're working on those. There was a drainage canal that people probably aren't aware of that went from Lake Blue to Lake Cannon, and a lot of that was open ditches and open canal, which I didn't think was a very good issue, and everybody else didn't think it was a good issue, including the health department. So a lot of that area now has been piped and it's been covered over. Now the drainage from Lake Blue still goes into Lake Cannon, but now it's covered. So we don't have open ditches of standing water, which breeds mosquitoes and does all kinds of other unsightly things that you want. Trash gets in there. It's just an unhealthy situation. So we have really made quite an investment in drainage. The drainage issues mostly were financed by CDBG, which is Community Development Block Grants from the federal government that we have to match, but it gives us funds to do things like that. So.
And I know those mosquitoes, those pesky mosquitoes are very, we hate them, and I'm so glad that you put them on your priority and to help get rid of it as best we can. We're quickly moving out of time, so let's move on, because the third part we were talking about are sidewalks. And this is really important because when you talk about sidewalks, it's not just a necessity, but when you talk about our kids going to school, it's absolutely essential.
Absolutely, and this is an issue. As you know, Polk County has now formed a sidewalk priority commission whose job is to look at sidewalk needs throughout the county, to prioritize them, and see in what order we want to spend our sidewalk money. Sidewalks are not just a convenience.
Right.
There's a safety issue, and I mentioned the children out on Old Dixie Highway being hit on the way to school, and matter of fact, we had 2 fatalities out there. Another student was hit, I understand, by a mirror on the side of a truck and knocked over into the ditch. Obviously, it's a very serious situation. I understand the child suffered a broken arm, but was not a fatality.
Right.
But you know, Safe Routes to School also is a federal program, and we can tap into some funds there to do that. But we have a lot of places in Polk County that Safe Routes to School is important for our children. And our children is our most important resource, and we all understand that.
Right.
As you know, I retired from the school system, so the safety of children going to school and the safety of children at school is a huge issue to anybody who has worked in the school system. You know, one of our biggest mandates, as a matter of fact, in the school system is, number 1, keep my child safe.
Absolutely.
And number 2, educate my child.
Right.
So, I mean, if you can't keep them safe, you're not going to educate them. And so we understand that, and that we understand the mandate, and that Polk County also has a role in that, as does the state government and the federal government, and we all do. And they're all our children, Okay.
Yeah. And of course, just like the roads, the sidewalks, we need them now, but it takes time. And the progress is being made, but it's not going to happen overnight. The time is quickly going by.
We're not going to do them all this week.
That's exactly right. Real quickly, we have about a minute. That's about it. But the Poinciana Parkway, which is about halfway, I believe, in construction. I think December of 2016 is when they're looking at maybe, hopefully, getting it underway. Real quickly, why is this so important? It is in a very isolated part of the county, but it's in a growing part of the county.
It is a growing part of the county. I think people don't realize how many people live there, and it was an isolated part of the county. You know, if trying to get somebody out of there under the circumstances that existed before was just unimaginable. Now we've got a hospital now, which has made a big difference. But 2, 3, 4, whatever years ago, if during rush hour a person living in the Poinciana area had a heart attack, you know, trying to get them to a hospital in Osceola County was almost impossible.
Right.
It was gridlock getting people out of there. So Poinciana Parkway is going to provide an access, ingress and egress, as a matter of fact, from that area that was in planning for 20 years, and we just didn't have the money to build it. I say we didn't have it. This originally was a private project on private property, but anybody who went there and looked could see this is beyond the scope of private property.
Right.
Government had to become involved. We were talking building a highway, if you can imagine this, a 4-lane highway through the middle of a swamp. Stop and think about that for a minute. And it was the total project, I think, was something in the neighborhood of $150 million. This is not the normal thing that private enterprise can do.
Right, right. Well, unfortunately, there's so much more we could talk about, but the time goes by very quickly. Commissioner Ed Smith, I appreciate you being here, and I have a feeling we're going to be talking about these situations in future shows.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, I said we need to make this a 2-hour show instead of 15 minutes, because a lot of these issues, you well know, are very complex.
Right.
And you can't just sit there and say, well, I'm going to give 15 minutes and I'm going to tell you everything you need to know. So,
well, hopefully we've whet your appetite and touched base on some things and give you some more information on these very important issues. Again, Commissioner Ed Smith, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Absolutely.
I'm anxious to come back.
And thank you for joining us, and we hope you will join us again for another edition of the Commissioner's Report. Take care.